I thought I'd go over a topic we haven't discussed a lot here in a while, and that is the Dereck Chauvin trial about the death of George Floyd, and which is now in the middle of jury selection. And that's there's a lot of interesting things that are going on there, and I thought I'd just kind of go through that and see what we could glean from the situation. The jury selection has now progressed to the level of seven have been picked. I think they're going for 14 total, and I guess 2 will be the alternates, if I understand this correct. And then the others will be the ones that actually make the verdict. And it's sort of interesting to see what we're getting here, because obviously trial by jury often depends a lot on what jury you get. In other words, if you get the wrong jury, you may get the wrong verdict. So it's interesting. What we've got right now of the 7 people, and apparently since this is a racial case, by definition, I guess, it shouldn't be, but it seems like it's always going to be played that way by the media, if nothing else. And they're going to be focused on this aspect of it. First of all, though, it's interesting that the jurors that have been picked so far are mostly have kind of a more of a professional tint to them, rather than, let's say, just basically somebody that works at a a restaurant, or something involving labor, if you will, in a normal sense. They have a chemist, they have an auditor, sales sales data person, an IT manager, and a healthcare executive from a nonprofit. On the other hand, we have one with unknown profession, perhaps not employed. We don't know that. And one is a driver, I guess, like a truck driver, I guess what we're talking about here. So he would be more in your blue-collar category. But the rest of them seem to be very kind of white-collar professional type people. The other thing is, of the racial breakout, I think it's like 4 white so far, 1 apparently biracial, black and some other race. And you have a black who's an immigrant, and the driver's Hispanic. So it gives you an idea of kind of the breakout. So it's not a monolithic type jury. The other aspect is some of the things that come out to characterize them in the questioning. For instance, one of them says they support BLM because all lives matter. Obviously, somebody that doesn't have a strong sense of being PC, because BLM and all lives matter are almost anathema phrases to each other, as we should know. The lady that's biracial seems to has an uncle in law enforcement, and she's a BLM supporter, which leads you to wonder, maybe she doesn't like her uncle very much. Also, this individual was actually enthusiastic to be on the jury, and I'm like, why would anybody in their right mind be enthusiastic to be on this jury? But unless you're enthusiastic to convict somebody. But at any rate, I mean, certainly I really feel for the people that might end up having to vote to acquit them, because obviously if they haven't heard of cancel culture and the idea of a mob in front of your house, etc., maybe, well, at any rate. And then you have one individual. The auditor has a negative view of Chauvin, the police officer, because somebody died. Okay. No, he didn't say because the guy killed the guy. But at any rate, but that seemed to be there. And another individual said that Floyd was under the influence and somewhat unruly. That seems to be kind of a good case for the defense, I guess. The immigrant had a negative view of Chauvin. He's the IT manager. And then there's one individual that the driver said if he'd complied, the incident wouldn't have happened. That seemed to be good for the defense. And finally, the nonprofit high-level executive person had sympathy for both the victim and or whatever and the policeman. So it does seem like, each of these people had to go through this process where they're questioned by both the prosecutors and the defense attorney, and this is kind of what came out. I mean, each of them have preemptory challenges, which means they can kick somebody off for no particular reason. However, there's another rule which says if they're blatantly kicking people of one race off totally, then that can be overruled by the judge, or should be, or something like that. So, and that's kind of where things are going on that. So it seems, I mean, I would say that it's looking fairly good for the defense as far as a jury selection. Now, on the prosecutorial team, perhaps not. Now, the defense attorney seems to be a competent defense attorney. But on the other hand, I would say that the prosecution has brought in a lot of Ivy League level lawyers with a lot of experience, apparently, and so in other words, it's kind of a dream team set of prosecutors. I didn't know they were allowed to do that. You can bring in people that don't actually work for the prosecutor's office, just as well, we'd rather have somebody better than our own staff, so we're going to bring in these outsiders. But apparently they can, and they are. So that's going to the defense. That's going to be a real negative for the defense, obviously, because the caliber of what the prosecution is going to bring there is going to be above what you would normally have on a high-level prosecution. Maybe the people out in the OJ trial years ago should have thought of that option rather than using their own staff. I don't know. So anyhow, so that's kind of this quick rundown of what it is. Now, I think when you look at the facts that are out there, it's pretty clear-cut that one problem is since all the charges, both the two murder charges, second-degree murder, and this kind of odd Minnesota law called third-degree murder, and the manslaughter charge, all have one thing in common, and that is that the police officer Chauvin was the cause the death of George Floyd. And I've made an argument sometime in a previous video that I don't believe that is what caused his death. I think he probably died largely due to complications of a drug overdose of fentanyl. And in addition to which, apparently he was not in the best of heart health, plus the stress and everything else of the whole incident probably is what led to his death. And remember, what you'll see if you've learned more about this case, then I picked up information from all sorts of sources, including some of the Tucker Carlson stuff. I've been following a lot of this from the YouTube videos by an individual known as a lawyer, actually known as Robert Ruler. Oh, it's spelled with a G. The G is silent in this case. Who is a defense attorney out in Arizona, and I've got a lot of information from him too. But this kind of condenses it down into a simple description of what's likely here. But the point is that given the fact that his fentanyl level was well over 3 times the level that is often used to attribute to be the cause of death, in a person that, let's say, is just found dead somewhere where they're living or where they are, would indicate to me that there clearly is a reasonable doubt that the officer caused his death. Also, the fact is that asphyxiation was not listed as one of the cause of deaths in the coroner report, so you're left with a situation. He wasn't choked to death, and he had a lethal level of a dangerous drug in his system. It's going to be kind of hard to see how there isn't a reasonable doubt. I mean, I understand reasonable doubt as being something that's not unreasonable, such as, well, he was killed by a witch's spell, or something of that sort. I mean, something really off the, or just something really, a hostile drug dealer hit him with a poison dart in the back and nobody noticed it. Or, I mean, you can imagine absurd defenses that people had. I think in the OJ case, the idea that Colombian drug lords were the ones that killed the 2 victims there. That's the example of what you would call an unreasonable defense case, right? But here is a very reasonable one. He clearly could have been killed with a fentanyl level in his system, and it's complicated by certain health conditions he had, and the fact that the drugs apparently caused him to become incredibly erratic when confronted by the police. I mean, he was out of control. That's why he ended up in the position he was in anyhow. So regardless of what you think about all the police tactics, the likelihood it actually caused his death And apparently this tactic is not unknown. One might want to reevaluate this sort of, knee on the neck tactic. But in reality, this has been used in many other cases, very few of whom have died. So it seems to me quite clear that the jury is objective. They're going to have to find him not guilty. Now, but who says they're objective? Well, they do seem to be so far. At least they're claiming to be objective, and a lot of people have been dismissed either because they found something prejudicial in their background, or that they found, that they just were unable to say they could come to an objective verdict. So I think that kind of characterizes the situation going in. Now there's 7 more to go, and they had some early pickings early on, and later on we'll see when they get wrapped up sometime probably next week. They get all 14, the 12 jurors and the 2 alternates. So I think he has an interesting chance of actually acquittal here. You would think, given the fact that there's or at least a hung jury, and that might be the most likely outcome actually. If there are some people that were somewhat deceptive and really do think the guy's guilty and have a very biased viewpoint, or simply too afraid to find him not guilty, which I think that's quite understandable actually, given that verdict could very well lead to another round of rioting, and would you want to be responsible for that? So so that's one of the things that you have to consider here, and so that. But that's kind of my assessment at the moment. We'll see what else comes in. Another thing I found interesting following the information that's being presented on this Robert Ruler, Watching the Watchers videos on YouTube, is the degree to which these trials are choreographed. I've not had a lot of experience with the pre-trial maneuvers. I've been called to jury duty, let's see, I think 3 times in my life, and I never got to the point of actually hearing a trial. In one case, I think 2 cases, the defendant took a plea bargain before they actually got underway, and the other case, I was never selected for a panel. Just sat there for a couple of days and was dismissed. So I've never been through what goes on in a high-level trial. The degree to which these things are choreographed and various types of evidence are reviewed ahead of time beforehand is whether they can come in or not. And of course that's going to have a lot to do with the ultimate outcome. For instance, apparently in previous instances, George Floyd was known to when confronted with the potential of a police investigation or arrest, to simply taken all the illegal drugs on his person so he doesn't get caught with them. Well, that could explain the overdose of fentanyl that he actually was suffering from at the time of his death. So I think what you can conclude about the video is it just how sad it is to see somebody who's dying, Now, I guess you could, if the charge was basically a failure to render aid, which is, you could argue that line, but I don't think that any of the 3 charges really fall into that category. And I think that at the end of the event, I think it was waiting for paramedics to show up, and the person was really out of control early on and had to be subdued or they couldn't control him, And he was obviously a strong man, so that's one of the things you always run into when you have a particularly strong individual who physically fights police who may individually not be as strong. And they have to use various tactics to get control of the situation, which lead to unfortunate outcomes. In other words, if this individual was a relatively small and diminutive and weak individual physically, probably nothing like this would have ever happened. Even if he had a similar level of intoxicants in his system or whatever. But anyway, I just thought people might be interested in what's developing in this case. You'll hear about it in the media and perhaps in many instances with a lot of bias. But actually, if you look at the inside of what's occurring here, this may go in a direction completely different than what the media is saying. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I hope if you like these videos, remember to if you haven't subscribed, if you're on YouTube, to subscribe and ring the bell, and also forward the links to this to other people that might be interested. All for now.